Hi everybody again. Aral Balkan is an ethical designer. Attending to his Twitter profile, he's also ex-Muslim, atheist, and an activist for the rights of the cyborgs. Welcome, Aral.
Thank you.
Can you explain to me and to the people who are the cyborgs?
Ooh, okay. You want to start with that, or
yes,
should I start
briefly,
with a little?
Briefly, and then
okay.
you
All
will
right.
shoot
Why
your
don't we do this then? Here,
because am I a cyborg?
Are you a cyborg?
Am I a cyborg?
Yes, you are. You are definitely a cyborg.
Those people are cyborgs?
Yeah. So basically, when I talk about a cyborg, what I mean is anyone that uses modern technology today, digital technology today. And that's because we use technology to extend ourselves. So I'll be talking a little bit about that in my introduction. But it is the nature of technology, basically. In fact, let's jump forward a little bit to where I can illustrate that if you'd like me to. We're kind of going to go non-linear, apparently, today. So if I just jump over here, I had it somewhere here. Anyway, we'll get to it. We'll
profundize later in the cyborg's nature. But I have also one more provocation, because people
So yeah, this is not a descriptive thing. So since we're doing it, it's not prescriptive. I'm not saying you should be a cyborg. I'm saying that if you use modern technology today, you are a cyborg because you extend yourself using the technology. So again, I'll be talking about this later in our lineup, but that's why you're a cyborg. And it's very important because if we understand that we extend ourselves with technology and that they're part of ourselves, then we can start to protect the rights of the person by including those technologies within those rights. So I'll go into more detail about that.
Of course. I have one more provocation because we as human beings are not more just flesh and blood and bones and thinkings. We are more and more data. And there are some people, some companies who is copying our data and they are prepared for supplanting our identities.
Right.
That's threatening. I am scared about it. So I will be very, very interested in your presentation. You can start as soon as you want.
Okay, great. Let me just introduce what I do basically with this. Because it is exactly about that. So the reason I'm here today is because when I was about 7 years old, my dad brought home a computer that looked something like that, and it had a programming manual with it, a basic manual. And with it, I could write a few lines of code, and I could create stars. If I wrote a few more lines of code, I could create a starship. And with a few more lines of code, I could actually fly that starship inside of a universe that I had created. And that's a very magical thing to be able to do. And the thing is, when you're 7 and you can create your own universe, that makes you feel like you can do anything. But there was one thing that this computer didn't do. It didn't watch everything that I was doing. It didn't store it forever. It didn't share it with some company somewhere so that they could use it to psychoanalyze me continuously, to understand my behavior, to understand who I am, so that they could exploit my behavior for their monetary, for their profit, and for their political motives. It didn't do any of that. And if a computer back then did any of this, if you installed an app on a floppy disk and it did some of this, we knew what to call it. We called it malware. We called it spyware, and we knew it was bad. But today, we call that the business model of the potentially next billion-dollar unicorn from Silicon Valley, right? So we've made this the mainstream business model of technology. And that's because this era of technology was the last time that we had decentralized technologies, computers that we owned and controlled as individuals. This was not the first era of computing. There was an era beforehand with mainframe computers. And mainframe computers were owned by companies.
Yes.
They were owned by large universities, and you had to rent time on them. They were somebody else's computers, and all you could do is rent time on them. And with personal computers, we had agency again. We had ownership, we had control. But then we went back to the future. in a sense, with the web, the World Wide Web. We think of the World Wide Web as decentralized, but it's not. It's centralized. The servers, it's client-server. You have a client, you have a browser, you have your own computer, you have your phone, but you connect to a server somewhere, right? Those servers are in Google, Facebook, etc., right? They are the new centers. They are the new mainframes. So the web era really is the mainframe 2.0 era. We have gone back to having a centralized system, only it's far greater in scope. It's not a couple of companies, large companies somewhere in a couple of universities. Now it affects all of us. All of us have to use other people's computers. And this is the core problem. So what interests me and what I work on with my tiny not-for-profit is what's coming next. Think of this as a pendulum. What's coming next? What is the decentralized technological era in the age of the internet? We're not going to go back in time. But what is the representation of that going forward? Because, I mean, if you think about it, every one of our smart devices today, whether it's a smart television or a smart watch that you wear or a smart car or a smart teddy bear, they all work the same way, by gathering data about you. And this is just how modern technologies work. This is not the problem itself. The real question is, I mean, this is just a fact of life, right? The real question is, who owns and controls these technologies, this data, and the insight into our lives? Now, if we can answer this question with we do as individuals, there's no problem here. We have a democracy, right? But if the answer, which comes back to the question you were asking, is that corporations own and control this information, this data, this insight, this technology, and by extension, it's made available to governments, then we have a very different type of social system that we're talking about. We're talking about an autocracy, a corporate-run system, a corporatocracy. And that's where we are today, because our technologies and data and insight are controlled by a handful of large corporations. And this is a system that Shoshana Zuboff calls surveillance capitalism. So in the movie The Matrix, people live in a virtual world while they are increasingly being farmed, or they're farmed, their bodies are farmed in a tangible world, in a tangible space. We live in the Matrix inverted, where we are in a tangible space, we live in a tangible space, but we're being farmed from a virtual space. And the people doing the farming, like Mark Zuckerberg, for example, when he says privacy is dead, remember that he's talking about your privacy, not his privacy. Because when Mark buys a house, he buys the 4 houses around his house to protect his privacy. When he uses a computer, he actually tapes up the microphone and the camera to protect his privacy. And Mark, the same person, has 60 people working at Facebook right now to read your mind, literally to read your mind. He has other people working on putting devices into your homes with cameras that can facially recognize you and listen to you all the time. So it's very important that we remember that when he says privacy is dead, he's talking about your privacy. And we have to understand the social reasons behind this. Mark's a very special person. He's a very, very special person. In fact, he's a very special man, right? He is one of 5 very special men who, according to Oxfam, a charity that combats poverty based in the UK, have as much wealth today as half of the world's poorest population combined. That's as much wealth as 3.5 billion people. So think about it. If you're one of these special men, they're all men. There are no women in this statistic. If you're one of these special men, what would you do? You would probably build some walls around yourself, really thick walls, right? And you would probably want to keep an eye on everyone else. You know, all those people out there that don't have much, that probably want maybe some of what you have, let's keep an eye on them, let's watch them. And we can do this in tangible space, but we can also do this from virtual space. And in fact, here's where the two tie together. Here's where the social system and the technological system tie together. This is also exactly the business model of the companies of these 5 men. Because if we're talking about those 5 men, we're talking about Bill Gates from Microsoft, we're talking about Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, we're talking about Larry Ellison from Oracle, we are talking about Jeff Bezos from Amazon. So we're talking about people, and Michael Bloomberg from Bloomberg. So we're talking about people whose companies share the same business model. Do you see how surveillance capitalism works? Because the business model is that you have 2 audiences. So Facebook has 2 audiences. They have their users, we call them users, and they have their customers, 2 separate audiences. And Facebook's business, how they make money, is they watch and track everything that their users do to gather data, information about them, to build profiles with this information, which they then sell to their customers and rent to their customers. So they're farming one group and they're selling the insight that they get to another group. And they do this in server farms, right? We talked about the new mainframes or server farms. What are they farming, if not us? That is their business model. So I call this business model people farming. And it is the business model of Silicon Valley. It's the business model of Google, Snapchat, Facebook. Think about your favorite startup. Startup is a very Silicon Valley brand, if it's a real startup, if it takes venture capital. So, when these systems that we all use, when they improve their products, like when Facebook improves its products, it's like the massages that we give to Kobe beef. It's not for the benefit of the cow. It's to make the cow a better product. And we have to understand that. It's not for our benefit when they improve their products. And in this analogy, we are the cow. So it's also not, this is very important to understand, this is also not a mistake that they keep making. They don't keep making mistakes. This is systemic. So when Facebook first started in Harvard, at a Harvard dorm room, it was a startup. And the way a startup works is it needs money. And the place that it gets money from is a venture capitalist. So Mark went to a venture capitalist and said, look, I have a new people farmer. I have a new people farm. It's the business model you invest in, so you know it well, right? It's the only business model that can scale so quickly. So if I'm successful, in a few years' time, we're going to have 200, 300 million people using Facebook. How much money will you give me today for when we sell those people in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time? Because you have to understand that this is how venture capital works. A venture capitalist does not invest in the business. They don't invest in a sustainable business. They invest in the exit, the sale of a business. So that's no way to create sustainable businesses. So the venture capitalist in this case said, Mark, I trust you. I'm going to give you $5 million. I've also put $5 million into 9 other businesses. I know 9 of those are going to fail. If you don't, I'll make $1 billion, right? And that's how it works. And this has given us a world where one company, Google, can track you across 70 to 80% of the web as you're browsing the web. How? Anytime anyone puts Google Analytics, anytime anyone puts a YouTube video, anytime anyone puts a G+ button onto a website, Google can track you as you're going. The 70% statistic is from a Princeton study. The 80% statistic is from my own web crawls. It's given us a world where, according to my own web crawls, the worst site that I could find recently for tracking you had 172 trackers on it. You went to one website and 172 other websites and companies could track you. It's given us a world of fake news. Why? Because we no longer have a free press. We have the behavioral advertising industry. We have ad tech, as it's called. Axel Springer is one of the biggest publishers in Europe. And according to their lawyer at a recent lawsuit, they said the core business of Axel Springer is to deliver ads to its visitors. This is the biggest publisher in Europe. Journalistic content is just a vehicle to get visitors to view the ads. So we've created a world where journalism is bait, and we wonder why we have fake news. We've created a world where Facebook has patented a system, a camera system, and a software system where they can watch you without your knowledge so that they can run emotional analysis on you. And if you're sad, maybe they'll show you something. And if you're happy, maybe they'll show you something else. Or where Google can follow you all the way to the store and track your credit card details. And where all of this information is being shared with governments. So to end my introduction, if you need one image to summarize what surveillance capitalism is today, it's this one. These are the leaders of the largest technology companies in the world who among themselves have more information about more people in the world than any group has ever had in the history of mankind, sitting at the same table as then President-elect Donald Trump. Now, if that doesn't scare the shit out of you, I don't know what will. So that's my little introduction.
It's really scary, if I understood you properly, Aral.
I think you understood me properly.
A new slavery is coming with only a few owners, and where we are the slaves.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you think about slavery, right? Slavery was this system, economic system that we had where we owned the bodies of people and everything else that they are, right? What do we call the system of owning everything else about a person that makes them who they are apart from their biological body? Because that is the business model of Silicon Valley today. That is the business model of these people that are, you know, the heroes of some in the neoliberal world, the Mark Zuckerbergs, etc. What do we call that? It is definitely a new slavery.
It's a new slavery, and it's a process that is happening just now. Could you show us some examples of these happenings?
Okay, sure. Let me see if I have that here, because I have a couple of examples that I can illustrate here.
Brave.
So yeah, let's talk about, you know, how we're being tracked, for example. One of the things, as you're walking around in a city, you have a phone with you, and your Wi-Fi and your Bluetooth are on, and you're being tracked. Currently, the best piece of legislation that we have, a proposal called e-privacy regulation, says if you're being tracked, then they have to tell you with a sign that you're being tracked. Okay. Now, this isn't even law yet. They don't have to do that right now. But, okay, so what if I don't want to be tracked? Oh, turn off your phone. Unacceptable, right? And thankfully, the European Parliament, the group that's working on this, also said unacceptable. But there are a lot of changes happening in Europe, and most of them are really positive ones. The e-privacy regulation, the version of it that the European Parliament pushed back is very positive. So I hope to see that go through. Facial recognition. So recently, I was on Twitter, and I saw this. Somebody tweeted this photo. This is a menu, an electronic menu in Norway at a Pepe's Pizza. And if you look at it, it says, I don't know if you can read that, but it says male, adult, attention time, and it gives a 0 out of 191. Is the person smiling? Are they wearing glasses? So this menu, while people were looking at the menu, was looking at them and trying to recognize whether they're male, female, they care, are they looking, what is this person, what are they doing? Wow, right? Yeah, I love it. In the front row, they're just like, ah, great. Do you know what Amsterdam has done? So Amsterdam has taken all of their live license plate information from people who are driving around the city, and they've given it to Google. They've given it, right? They didn't even sell it. So they're not even making any money from it. They gave, why? Because Google said to them, hey, if you give us all this information in real time, we can tell you when there are free car park spots. And the CTO of Amsterdam, and I know this because I was on a documentary, you know, they flew over, a Dutch crew flew over to Malmö to film me about smart cities. When we were talking, and they're like, and do you know what the CTO of Amsterdam has done? I was like, no. And they're like, he's done this. I'm like, roll the camera. And in the final version, the CTO of Amsterdam's going, oh yes, and we did this great deal with Google, and it's so great, it's wonderful, and it's going to be, and then it cuts to me, and I go, this is absolute bullshit. And here's why. And the Dutch love that. But really, like, what are we doing, right? We are privatizing, de facto privatizing our citizens. Why? Because we're not even thinking of them as citizens. We're thinking of them as consumers in a single market. We got to go beyond that. And there are ways, there are ways. You could use homomorphic encryption, for example, to do this in a privacy-respecting way. Where I live in Malmö, another example, we have a city bike scheme. Do you guys have city bikes here? Anyone can take them, etc., right? We have the city bike scheme. And this all over the place. And you pay a certain amount, very small amount every year, and then you can get any one of these bikes, and I thought, this is so cool. This is the world I want to live in, right? I can just get a bike, I don't have to own, I can move around. Until you read the terms and conditions. Because I thought this was the city of Malmö doing it. No, if you sign up to this, it says here you have entered into a binding agreement with Clear Channel. Do you know what Clear Channel is? An advertising agency, huge, huge advertising conglomerate. But there are no ads on the bikes. There are no ads on the bikes. How are they making money? Ask this. What is their business model, right? How are they, we've got an answer here. They're following you, they're tracking you, they know where you're going. They're compiling this information, adding it to your profile, adding it to all of this information that they have about you, okay? And if you think that's bad, let's go to Italy. Because in Italy, they have sold the full medical records of 61 million of their citizens to IBM. Right? So IBM came and they said, oh, we want to do good. We want to help you with your medical, so we're going to invest $150 million into Italy. And Italy said, here's all the medical information that you ever want about our citizens. Have it, IBM. IBM Watson and it's called Watson. Their AI is called Watson. Go on the internet and do some research on the Watson, the CEO of IBM, that Watson is named after. Look around the 1930s to 1940s. Look at which country and which regime he got a medal from. It's a Nazi regime. I'm going to ruin it for you. So this is Watson 2.0, and it has all of the medical information of everyone in Italy.
So we found that the Big Brother is very, very hungry for our data.
Well, it is, yeah.
Why is data so important?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I'm going to come to that, but I want to just say one thing. This is all about smart cities, right?
Okay.
So this is where it's really moving into our cities now. Ask the question, who's getting smarter about whom, right? Is it, again, back to this, is it us getting smarter about ourselves? Then that's great. Our cities are going to be homes. But if it's corporations getting smarter about us, and then the government getting smarter about us, then we're starting to build prisons instead of cities. And a specific type of prison, a panopticon.
Penalty.
A panopticon. So it looks like this, if you can see it. I'm not sure if you can just bring the lights down a little bit. It's a prison with a central tower where if there are guards there, they can see all the prisoners, but the prisoners cannot even see if there are guards there. So their assumption is that they're always under surveillance, that they're always being watched. And that has chilling effects for society. If you think you're being watched, you're going to change your behavior. And that is not conducive to democracy. So for those of you here who are working with cities, with smart city projects, etc., just remember one thing. We just need one thing to fix this, right? And it's not a deeply philosophical thing. We need a kindergarten rule. Never accept candy from strangers. Right? Seriously, let's make this really clear. Never accept candy from Silicon Valley. That's it. That's all we need to solve this. That's all. Would you like me to answer your question on what data is?
Yes, because...
All right. We didn't plan for this. Pre-planned last night, an hour. No, we didn't do that.
Think that writers like George Orwell or Aldous Huxley alert us 60 years ago about this dystopia, but it's here now.
Well, yeah, basically, that's the thing. We're not sleepwalking into something. That's the worst mistake we can make, to think that if we're not careful, something's going to happen. We're there. How do we build a better progressive path forward is the only question that I really am concerned with right now. I mean, if we're talking about Orwell and we're talking about Huxley, they were living in a very different era. And I mean, Orwell, was very worried about the sort of communism and the sort of effects that a communist society could have created in the terms of what he saw. you know, as the autocratic aspects of what he was living in. Huxley, probably his vision is much closer to maybe what we're living in, not one where, you know, we have a big brother watching us all the time, but many brothers, many little brothers, and we're okay with it, you know, because we get a lot of things out of it. We're all very, you know, we're consumers. We see ourselves as consumers, and we're happy with this system that exists. But so what is data? This is important, because
data is really the blood of the world at this time.
Well, we hear things like it's the new oil, right?
Yes, of course.
And that's a disgusting thing if you think about it, and here's why.
Let's go.
First of all, when we're talking about data, are we talking about data about rocks, or are we talking about data about people? This is a very key distinction, because we usually use the word data as a generic, and then we make policies based on this generic word. But there are things that I can do to a person that I can't do to a rock, right? I can't deprive a rock of its freedom. I cannot physically or emotionally hurt a rock. I cannot deprive a rock of its life. I can do all of these things to people. So what does it mean if we talk in generics and create policies and legislation in generics about data? One of these two elements is going to get the short end of that stick, and it's not going to be the rock. It's going to be us. So we need to really understand the difference. And if we're talking about data about people, well, what's that? Let me give you an example with a statue.
Please.
Right? A tiny little statue, a statuette. If I have a tiny statue and I have enough data about this statue, I can take a 3D printer and I can create a replica of this statue. Now, I want you to think what I can do if I have enough data about you. And I'll give you a hint. I don't want to 3D print you. Some of us might. But I don't. She's doing it for the best reasons. No. But I don't want to 3D print you. But I do want to simulate you. I want to create a digital copy of you, and I want to own that copy. And it's dangerous, regardless of whether the copy I have is high fidelity or low fidelity, if it's close to what you are, or if it's very different from what you are. Because if it's very different to what you are, I might think that you're a terrorist when you're not a terrorist. If it's very close to who you actually are, if I'm getting very Yes. The concept of a cyborg really comes down to personhood in the digital age. What does it mean to be a person in our current era? So again, this is you, right? And this is how we normally draw the borders of the self, at our biological borders. And through the years, and with a lot of difficulty, we've created a system of legislation, of laws, and justice that knows how to protect the integrity of the self. We call it human rights law, right? We've had this. And it wasn't always there. People were property at one point. But what happens when your technology comes into the equation? And this is really, it centers on what the nature of our relationship with technology is. Is it, when I have a thought, and I want to put that thought onto my phone and not keep it in my head, do I have a conversation? Do I talk to my phone, like we do with Siri, with the other devices? Do I say, hey phone, write this down, and my phone says, okay, Aral, I'll write it down for you. If this is our relationship, then surveillance is what surveillance has always been. Signals capture between two actors that are having a conversation. This is what the Stasi used to do, right? What if this is not the nature of our relationship? What if when I have a thought, and I don't want to just keep it in my head, or I don't want to keep it in my head at all, I want to put it on my phone, what I do is I extend my mind, and thereby I extend myself using this phone, this piece of modern technology. If this is how we see the relationship that we have with our modern technologies, then it makes perfect sense to extend our understanding of the boundaries of the self to include the technologies by which we extend ourselves. And if we do that, then surveillance becomes something completely different. It becomes an abuse of the self. And we already have a system of laws and justice that knows how to deal with abuses of the self. So what we need to do is we don't need new digital rights. We don't need new data rights. Data doesn't have rights. Humans have rights. We need to apply the human rights that we already have to the age, the digital age that we're living in today. And understand that we are cyborgs. You know, that our relationship to our technology is one of a cyborg to its organs. These don't have to be implanted in us. Most of our technologies today are external. They're explants. But they're no less within the boundaries of the self. And unless we understand that, then we can't apply the existing human rights we have. And what we're losing is personhood. We're losing the integrity of ourselves today. So we need to do no less than, I would say, take the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and in the theme of today, hack it, extend it to be the Universal Declaration of Cyborg Rights, to say that the boundaries must be greater. In fact, we've started that project, and we would love your feedback as well. It's online, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. But this is constitutional, core constitutional change that we need to effect going forward if we want to protect personhood. You know?
Okay. Even in the case I am really a cyborg, you convinced me, there should be a role for the ethic, for the ethical technology. You are an ethical designer. What's the role for the ethic in this world?
Okay. And remember, though, when I say you're a cyborg, I'm not being prescriptive. That's very important. I'm not saying that you have to be a cyborg, you have to use modern technologies. Quite the opposite. We have to protect the right to not use modern technologies as well, because we're seeing that a lot. We're seeing workplaces implement fitness trackers, for example, and if you don't do that, then you don't get like the insurance or discounts. We need to be very careful about that. But if you do use modern technology, you're a cyborg. Ethical technology? Why, I'm glad you asked.
Please, let us know.
All preparation. So ethical technology is ethically designed technology, right? We have a manifesto called the Ethical Design Manifesto, and it's all about one thing, really. It's all about respect. Respect for three very related things. One, respect for human rights at its very core. Two, respect for human effort. And three, respect for human experience. You combine all of these things and you get ethical design. But what does it mean? So respect for human rights. If I'm building technologies that respect human rights, then those technologies will be decentralized. People will own and control them. They will own the technologies, the hardware, the algorithms, the software. They will have them. They won't be somewhere else. They will be zero knowledge. The systems will not be trying to learn about them. They won't know anything about them if possible. They'll be free and open, which means that they're part of the commons. So that anyone can take it and improve it, with the caveat that you have to share back. So not like open source, where you can say, oh, thank you for sharing all of this. I'm going to combine it, put $1 million into it, make it better, but that's mine. No, right? Free and open, or else we have a tragedy of the commons going forward. Interoperable. How do we build things so that anyone can provide this service? Because we're not talking about a government providing services instead of corporations. That's no better, it's probably worse. We're talking about any organization being able to provide the same service and being able to talk to one another so there's no lock-in in the system. Sustainable and secure. But if we stop there, we don't win this at all. Because nobody's going to use the things that we make. We've had free and open source for 30 years. How many of you run a free and open source operating system on your phone, etc.? A few, right? And you're enthusiasts, and I get that. But the rest of you, no. Because who installs an operating system? Nobody. You buy a phone, right? And we haven't gotten to that level of effort and experience caring for it. So if you respect human effort, you build things that are convenient, right? And if you respect human experience, you build things that are beautiful and inspiring. Because think about it, experiences are really all we have in life, right? And then we die. So whether they're with people or they're with things, it's very much our responsibility as the people who make things to respect limited grains of sand that people have in their hourglasses, in the hourglass of their lives, right? So it would be very arrogant, like we do in the free and open source world, to just say, oh, we care about your rights, but it's hard to use, learn it. No. What if people have accessibility needs? What if they have other needs where they can't do that? You can't just think about yourself. It's very arrogant to do that. So we combine all these and we get ethical design. Now, here's the problem with the mainstream, with Silicon Valley. They do not respect human rights in the core of their business models. but they care a lot about human effort and human experience. What does that mean? Right? If our core is rotten, if the core of the apple is poisoned, and then you're trying to make the flesh taste really good and wonderful, and you're making it look really beautiful, and you really care about that, what are you creating? If not a poison apple out of a fairy tale, right? So this is not even design. Silicon Valley doesn't practice design. They practice decoration. Decoration is the practice of taking something which, if presented plainly, if I took the core, if I took Google's business model, which is to track everything and watch you and combine it together and exploit your behavior, if I took that and presented it to you, and Google said, here, you'd be like, what? That tastes and that smells terrible, that tastes terrible. So what do you have to do? You need to decorate it. So it's decoration. It's not design. It's taking something that would otherwise be unpalatable and trying to mask the taste, mask the smell. So don't do that. Instead, look at ethical design. You can find the manifesto on the internet as well at DMD/ethical design. So that's what ethical design is.
It's clear they are abusing of us. Is there any way we can protect ourselves from these abuses?
Well, there are examples of ethical technology. It's almost like we planned it. So yes, there are things that you can do, right? There are things that you can do. You can, for example, in the mainstream, even learn to differentiate between a company that sells you products, like Apple, when they sell you a phone, they're happy. That's how they make their profit. Versus a company that sells you. So when Google sells you an Android phone, they're not happy. If you throw that phone away, they're very unhappy with you. And there's a reason why that phone probably costs a little less. Because they only start making their money when you start using the phone, right? So at least we can learn, even within the system that we have, within the confines, to differentiate between companies that sell products and companies that sell people. Then we can go one better. And we can look at alternatives that are entirely free and open. And that might not fit all of your use cases. They may be harder to use at some points. There are companies like Purism that are really trying to make them easier. And more power to them. They're very young. We can look at existing systems like Twitter, which is centralized. It's based on people farming. And Mastodon, which came out about maybe 8 months, 10 months ago. And Mastodon allows you to run your own, or empowers you to run your own Twitter. Not have a Twitter account. Run your own Twitter, right? Either for just yourself, which is what I do on mastodon.aral, or you can run it for a community, your local neighborhood, or a local club, or a local volunteer system in Spain. You could run your own for that. And you make all the rules there. You decide what you can say, what you can't say. If you break the law, of course, the police can show up at your door. That's always the case, and nobody has to listen to you. But you're in control. Twitter Incorporated is not in control of what's going on there. And all of these different Twitters, these mastodons, can all talk to each other as well. So if there are 100 people here and 1,000 people here, and I follow one person from there, all of those 100 people can see what I'm saying on their federated timeline. So we build these communities in an organic way. They don't scale like Silicon Valley, like a virus, like a cancer, because that's what it is, right? Infinite growth with finite resources. The best thing I know that does that is cancer, right? We grow in a sustainable, horizontal way. Talks.chat is a great privacy-respecting, decentralized chat system. Signal is a centralized one, but it's free and open, and again, privacy-respecting. Laura and I work at our not-for-profit, and we built a prototype based on about $100,000 of crowdfunding that lets you communicate privately. That was just a prototype. But these things can and do exist, and I think that's very important to know.
It's realistic to think in an alternative to this centralized world?
Yeah, of course we can. I mean, I'm gonna skip this bit where we were talking about some of the challenges that we have. But no, actually, let's not. You know what? Is there an alternative to the centralized world? Yes. There's certain things, if we want this alternative, we need to protect. One is end-to-end encryption. It's under threat. May, Macron, Merkel, they all basically are playing from the same playbook, saying, oh, end-to-end encryption is terrible because terrorists will use it. And we need to be able to listen to what everyone is saying when they're communicating, or else the terrorists will win. Well, that's just not true, right? That is not true. If you are looking for a needle in a haystack, the last thing you need is more hay, right? If you have a bigger haystack, you're not going to find that needle easier. We know what works with terrorism, with finding terrorists. Local policing, neighborhood policing, these things work. So we should be investing in those. Not making everyone insecure, taking away everyone's security so that a government can have control over its people. Net neutrality is another thing. So on the internet, one of the core founding principles was every piece of information has equal value. If you think about it as a highway, they all travel at the same speed. Now what some people want is for there to be faster lanes and slower lanes. And sometimes the way that they do that is it looks like it's for social good. Wikipedia 0 is Wikipedia included for free with your mobile phone plan. But what does that mean for every other site? It means that they don't have that advantage. And it's only the first step. And then maybe Facebook is going to be for free in all of your plans because they have that as well. And what does that mean? So Facebook gets a huge advantage that every other website, every other service doesn't have. So this is a big, big issue. And of course, the biggest issue is that we're institutionally corrupt, right? Google is the biggest lobbyer of the European Commission. They spend hundreds of millions lobbying every year. And they're the ones who are talking to policymakers. So lobbying is a big problem, revolving doors. So today I'm working at the Commission. I should be protecting your rights, and I should be regulating Google, but in 3 years' time or 2 years' time, I'm going to work at Google. That's a problem. That's a big problem. That's corruption. We have public-private partnerships. We say, oh, yeah, the public sector should work in partnership with the private sector. That's not the role of people whose job it should be to protect the rights of their citizens. They can hire a private company, but the only power they have over a private company is the legitimacy they get from the democratic process from the people that they have. They are not powerful in terms of having more financial power. The companies are. So if you give up that power, your legitimacy, your democratic legitimacy, and you get into a partnership with Google, then you're playing by their terms, and the one with the money is going to be the one that benefits from that. And that's what we're seeing. If not, try to hire Google. Try and hire them and say, you're not going to get any of our citizens' data, but we want to hire you like any company. And of course, they won't do it, right? Multi-stakeholderism, co-regulation, asking Google, how should we regulate you? And they're like, we have an idea. Sure, we'll let you know. These are all this is institutional corruption. We need to combat that. And we need progressive technology policies. You know, we need to combat institutional corruption, public-private partnerships, de facto privatization of data, violation of human rights. We need to stop talking about consumers. We need to stop talking about the market. You know, we need to stop talking about users. There are only 2 industries that talk about users. One of them is drug dealers, and the other is Silicon Valley that talk about, you know, the people that they have being users. So we need to stop doing that. We need to start talking about citizens, human beings, human rights, individual sovereignty, a healthy commons, a decentralized, zero-knowledge, free and open, interoperable world. So this is some of the stuff that we're looking at with DIEM 25, which is a pan-European political movement. I was recently involved with them. They're actually starting, based on my proposal, an Internet of People section of their political policies that they have. That's something that we're going to be looking at with Indy as we become the IndyNet Institute to really try and create this Internet of People. But I don't know if we have time, but I would love to take you...
We don't have much...
We have 10 minutes?
10 minutes, because...
Would you like me to show you what I think an alternative internet would look like? Yeah? An internet of people. So this is what we're working on. Imagine an internet where every person has their own place on the internet. And it's this place where they can be public if they want to, or private, truly private, where they are the only ones that have access to that information. And where that private information synchronizes to all of their smart things. So remember at the beginning, the smart things were connecting just to Google and Facebook and these centers. What if the smart things connected to your place on the internet, and you're the only one that owns it and controls it and knows about it. And what if this was a system that any organization could provide as a service for you, and they can't even see what you're doing because it's interoperable? And what if we thought that having this was essential for democracy, essential for being a citizen, so we supported it from the commons, not with VC, etc., but from our taxes? People talk about crowdfunding stuff all the time, right? We have a term for crowdfunding things that are in the interest of the society as a whole. We call it taxes. And I don't know why we think that that's such a terrible word right now, but that's what it is. So we can use it from there. And then, because it's free and open, anyone can extend this system, but they have to share what they add with the commons because they took it from the commons. But they can, as a service to provide it, they can charge for it on top of the basics. And we can start building a healthy economy, an ethical economy on an ethical core instead of what we have today, which is this economy, this amazing economy for 5 people on a very unethical core. But where do we start? So we need to take the interweb and we need to move to an IndyNet, an internet of people. One, every one of you should have your own domain, right? But today it's like this. I need to find my own domain. Who's got their own domain? Who bought their own domain? Again, the same 3 people who are enthusiasts. And then you need to get a server somewhere. You need to install that. Who can do that here? Same 3, not even the 3 people. Okay, great. So this is not going to work because what we're competing with is this 30-second sign-up form on Facebook. If we cannot build the decentralized alternative to start up in 30 seconds, we're never going to get there. And also, by the way, you see that on Facebook? That's a lie. That's called false advertising. Facebook does not connect you to each other. Facebook connects you to Facebook. So that's absolute false advertising. There are alternatives. There is OpenNIC, which is an open domain name system, which no browser supports, which no operating system supports because it's outside of the capitalistic system. But you can add their domain name server right now, and you can see domain names and get them for free that nobody else can get, which is kind of cool. I was in Ghent on Thursday, and I realized that they have their own top-level domain, .ghent, one of the first cities. So I proposed something to them. I said, look, you want to build a city of people, because they're very progressive, and you have your own .ghent. Let's start the Internet of People here. What if everyone in Ghent, in Belgium, had their own .ghent domain that we gave to them, and that was linked to their own space on the internet? Well, this is amazing, because if we do this, we regain public space. Because public space online is the interconnections between sovereign nodes. It's not a place like a park that you go to in tangible space. So we get public space back. And this is synced with all of the devices. And then we can use this to connect people together peer-to-peer. So Ellen can find Ralph. And then when they communicate, it's secure. And then we can go further. And because they own their own spaces, they can decide how they communicate with the city as well. So if we do this, if we kick it off, then we can take this question that we had of, who owns and controls your data, and we can say, at least maybe starting in Ghent, that we do as individuals, we own and control our data. And this is what is compatible with a city being a home. This is what's compatible with democracy going forward. So I'd love to, this story has a happy ending because this was on Thursday and the mayor was there and their head of strategy, etc. And I got off stage and I went to the head of strategy of the city of Ghent and I said, so, what do you think? And he said, let's do it.
Yes, Aral, this is a very threatening diagnostic. There is threats and there is hopes in your diagnostic, but I have seen a lot of scaring faces in the public, and maybe some of them want or need to make you some questions. We only have 3 minutes, but you can make 1 or 2 questions. Okay. Here is one.
What if you don't want to be associated with a place? I love the idea of the .ghent, but I live in 2 different cities and travel everywhere, and I want to be global. So is there a .global that's not connected to a place?
Well, this is not something that regardless of how we implement it, it's not going to be something that's going to be forced on anyone. So you will have the option of having that as your own place if you want it. It's not going to be a compulsory thing. But if we can make this work, and we have about a year to make it work before the mayor changes, if we can make it work, it will be the first time in history that, and there's a huge challenge, huge challenge, because we will have to pull the .gent domain out of the capitalistic system and put it into the commons. ICANN is not going to like that at all. So there's going to be huge challenges. But if we can do this, what it will represent is a tiny little alternative, a spark that hopefully will spark people's imaginations to say, look, there is an alternative to the Silicon Valley narrative. It's not just about that's bad, that's bad, that's bad. Look, we can build technology differently. We can build it to respect human rights at its core. And here it is working. Here's the first test case. And imagine, I mean, you know, a city, even if it's a 250,000 people city, is nothing that can be ignored. You know, we need to start somewhere. Either it'll be Ghent. We're going to work very hard to see, you know, what we can do there. Or it will be OpenNIC. But regardless, the core design challenge, I think, of our time is how do we get people to have their own place on the internet and as easily and as conveniently as signing up for Facebook. The moment we solve this problem, then we have solved democracy. So we've gone a long way in technology to solving the aspects of the democracy problem that we have that technology is responsible for. So there's a social element, of course, to it. There are legal elements to it. But in terms of technology, we will have gone a very long way. But of course, it's not going to be something that's compulsory or that anyone has to sign up to, or it will not, of course, become a new identifier or an identity of any sort. We're not talking about ID cards or anything here.
Okay,
quite the opposite.
Left. One question left. No one? Go on.
Hi, thanks for the keynote. Just one question. What do you think about blockchain as an ethical technology or democratic system for people data?
Thank you for the question. Fucking blockchain. Okay, so here's why. Here's why, right? Blockchain is all we're talking about when we talk about any alternatives. Ask yourselves why, right? Whenever we talk about decentralization, the only topic we're talking about at conferences, etc., is blockchain. Blockchain is a libertarian wet dream, right? Blockchain, all it is, technically, is a database. It's a database that does decentralize one thing, one aspect, trust in decision-making. So it's a ledger. It's a ledger where we use a lot of the world's resources to ensure that it can't be faked, unless you have more than 50% of that workforce that's doing it. So it decentralizes certain aspects. It's great for if you want to have a contract where both parties don't trust each other or multiple parties don't trust each other. You don't want someone to say, I didn't agree to that in the past. For example, when you're making a financial transaction, right? And that's where we have cryptocurrencies built on top of it. But if you look at blockchain-based projects and the people who are funding them, they're all funded with venture capital, right? And we kind of saw, I think, that venture capitalists are not your friends, right? Why are they funding these? What big returns are they going to get? They all have initial coin offerings, right? They create a cryptocurrency and then absolutely no value, and then they go, give us lots of money for it. And overnight, they get $30, $40 million, and they've made a lot of money. Do you see why people are investing in this? So at its core, though, it's not decentralized topologically. A blockchain is a single file, right? It's copied, it can be copied, and you can be sure it's the same file. That's the whole idea. But it's all in one place. So what if we were using a blockchain to put messages on that blockchain, into that one database? We're putting it all into one place. Let's say the encryption is great today. It's the best encryption we can use today. The NSA can come, download the whole blockchain, keep it for 5 years as computational power increases, and by the time they've broken the best encryption we have today, they have all of the billions of messages of the billions of people there, and they can read it. If we build our technologies with blockchain at the core, right? That's not the same as actual decentralization, topological, geographical, because then you them up into a billion pieces and you give it to a billion people. And anyone who wants to, for example, spy on a billion people will have to find them. Will have to go to a billion places. That should be the core of any decentralized system we build. Now, what you can't do with that sort of a project is make billions. And that's why there's no venture capital. That's why we're not talking about it. So blockchain, what do I think of blockchain? I think blockchain is a distraction. Unless you're a libertarian who wants to make lots of millions very quickly, and if you actually care about solving the problems that we were talking about, then I don't think it's something that should be taking your attention away from the actual solutions we need to be building. Does that answer your question?
Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Very good question.
Our time is left. I encourage you.
I'm so sorry for keeping you from lunch.
I encourage you to continue this struggle, not to become slaveries evermore.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Let's do it together.
Very good.